Is a 250-mile-long path of destruction. Entire towns and communities destroyed. Dozens of people are dead, hundreds injured, and tens of thousands without heat, power, or running water right before Christmas. But amid all the heartache and terror, we are beginning to hear stories of survival and hope. The Friday night tornado cluster cut across 5 states with outbreaks in 3 more, very rare for December. And it happened in the middle of the night, which means many got little or no warning. And when the sun came up on Saturday morning, carnage like you've never seen. One of the hardest hit areas, the town of Mayfield, Kentucky. Hundreds of buildings said to be destroyed, homes, businesses, even churches. Many, many more badly damaged, and the scope of the destruction even causing the governor of Kentucky to choke up. Watch.
I know, like the folks in Western Kentucky, I'm not doing so well today, and I'm not sure how many of us are. We'll push through all of it because we don't have a choice, and we're strong enough to do it.
But the devastation isn't limited to Kentucky. In Arkansas, an entire nursing home was knocked down. In Illinois, an Amazon warehouse leveled. And today, President Biden said he plans to see the damage firsthand later this week.
I intend to travel to Kentucky on Wednesday. I haven't decided where I'm going yet. We're working out what I indicated to the governor when we talked about this 2 days ago, was that I don't want to be in the way. There's a lot going on, and when the president shows up, there's a long tail to follow, an awful lot of folks, and I just don't want to do anything other than be value-added.
State officials say the death toll will rise and the cleanup could take years. Many of those hit hardest say they plan to stay and rebuild everything from scratch because that's what Americans do, especially Midwesterners and Southerners. Joining us live from Mayfield, Kentucky, Fox News senior correspondent Mike Tobin. What's going on tonight, Mike?
Well, I can tell you, Kennedy, we see the power crews coming and going, but the big shovels that were at work all day, the dump trucks that were hauling debris, they have largely stopped with nightfall. What we see here around Mayfield, Kentucky, are big piles of bricks, a lot of twisted steel, and frankly, there doesn't seem to be a building in this town that didn't sustain major damage. What we saw throughout the day, we saw some of the search and rescue crews at work, specifically Task Force 1 out of Missouri, and they had the search and rescue dog. Notice I said search and rescue, not cadaver dogs. The officials out here still believe, despite 3 days having passed and some very cold nights, that they could still find survivors in the pockets of that rubble. Talked to a restaurant owner who lost the entire building, and he said it's going to be very difficult, but he plans to rebuild. Now, was your insurance all paid up?
For what we had, yes. During the pandemic, you got to kind of let things slide a little bit because there was no business. They couldn't come in and eat.
Guys like that say they're going to get a lot of loans from people they work with and people they know, go into a lot of debt, but they do plan to rebuild. Kentucky's governor says the death toll now stands at 74, still likely to rise with some 79 people, I should say 109 people still missing. Some of those victims are children. And that fact, as Kentucky's First Lady gave the emergency briefing, that fact became just a little more than she could bear.
As a mom, wife, daughter, and friend,
as a mom, wife, daughter, and friend, Brittany can only imagine the pain and grief that Kentuckians are feeling.
And you still have some 26,500 people without power here in the area. And I got to tell you, Kennedy, I've covered a lot of tornadoes in the past, everything from EF5s to tornadoes that have parked themselves and just wreaked havoc. Never seen one like this that cut such a long path of destruction. That thing took a foothold to the southwest of here and really just drove like a lawnmower, destroying everything in its path up to the northeast for some 227 miles. Back to you.
Mike, when will they know how powerful the storm really was?
Well, you know, the National Weather Service said they're going to estimate it at least an EF3, and that means it had winds up to 165 miles per hour. It will be very interesting. It takes a while to come out with those final ratings. It will be very interesting to see if they go all the way up to an EF5. It's been my experience that when you see an EF5 tornado touch down, it looks like a neighborhood that hasn't been built yet. All that remains are the foundations of the buildings. And you can see behind me, some things are still standing, but these are substantial structures. Something that could lead it to become get the rating of the EF5 is the fact that in these structures behind me, you have a lot of bent steel. And it's not like trailer homes that are ripped apart here. These are brick and steel buildings that are all receiving significant damage.
Yeah, good point. And you know, they have anticipated things like this, and they have built things to withstand whatever they possibly can. Great reporting. Stay safe out there. Thanks again, Mike Tobin.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, if you would like to help those hurting in Kentucky and elsewhere, we certainly encourage you to do so. You can call 1-800-HELP-NOW or visit redcross.org to donate whatever you can. And if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can donate through Alexa by saying, Alexa, make a donation to the American Red Cross. Now, while other people are looking for solutions to these devastating tornadoes, the White House, of course, finger-pointing their bony little fingers. President Biden on Saturday had this to say. Watch.
All that I know is that the intensity of the weather across the board has some impact as a consequence of the warming of the planet and the climate change. The specific impact on these specific storms, I can't say at this point. Obviously, it has some impact here, but I can't give you a quantitative read on that.
Obviously, it's not entirely obvious. Some scientists have been studying tornadoes for decades, and they still don't know what the exact link is between the climate and these events. So, Mr. President, instead of blaming the weather, why don't you just focus on helping these poor states rebuild? And let's get into it with tonight's party panel. We have Fox Nation host Abby Hornacek. Hi, Abby. Go Bruins. And from the Richard Fowler Show, where he serves as host, he's also a Fox News contributor, Richard Fowler, yes, and 2020 Libertarian vice presidential candidate. There he is in front of the NORAD map to the stars. It is Spike Cohen. Welcome, one and all.
This isn't actually happening behind me. This is a green screen, believe it or not.
Oh, Spike, I thought that you were hovering above us in space in your Libertarian super capsule. All right. Well,
no, it's all a trick.
Very good. Tricks indeed. That's what the White House is trying to employ right now, Abby. But isn't it a little soon to be blaming things on other things when there are people hurting and suffering losses they may never recover from?
Yeah, it's definitely too early. Look, I think a lot of people are focusing on President Biden's response to that. But just a reminder that that was a reporter's question, and I kind of put some of the blame on her. I don't think that was the time or the place to ask that. And then when it comes to Joe Biden, he had every opportunity to say, hey, look, that's a conversation to be had, but it's not a conversation to be had right now. Right now, we are focused on getting the help and the resources that we have to the thousands of people who have been devastated by these tornadoes. But look, he's a career politician. He's going to take a moment to be able to comment on climate change because that's a big part of his agenda. But yeah, definitely wasn't the time or the place for that, and I do think he could have shot down that question real quick. Yeah,
he's been a politician for like 1,700 years. He knows how to sidestep those things. That's a great point, and this is no time to service progressives. I'm sorry. And Richard, it's also very lazy, because if all you're doing is going, yep, climate change, that's it, nothing else to see here, we don't have to do any further investigation, you know, maybe it's something else, and maybe that something else could lead to tools that would help save people's lives in the future, instead of just blaming it on climate change, which is dumb.
Well, thanks for having me, Kennedy. Listen, I think there is a moment in this exchange between Joe Biden and this journalist where he could have definitely talked about what we've got to do to rebuild the many counties in Kentucky that have been ravished, and not only Kentucky, in Illinois, in Tennessee, and other parts of the country that have been ravished by the storms we saw over the weekend. My heart goes out to all of them. And I think what you're seeing from this White House is an administration that's prepared to help. There's already FEMA teams on the ground in many of these locations. The president will be going to visit in a number of days. But I do think, because the question was asked to him him by a journalist, I think his answer was fair. He said very clearly, it could be linked to climate change, but right now we don't know that. My number one priority is making sure that we get as many government resources on the ground to get as many lives saved and make sure people have water to drink, places to lay their heads, and food to eat during this natural disaster.
Yes, and climate expert Spike, when asked about the direct connection between climate change, which is real, okay, and tornadoes, are like, yeah, sure, there's something there, but we don't know exactly what it is. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and that's the thing is, so I will say, I think his response was a somewhat measured but pandery response to an aggressive reporter, is what it seemed like from that clip. Now, with that said, I think anyone who is trying to blame the fact that a tornado is happening, when tornadoes have been happening since, before recorded history, but that suddenly now it's because we aren't being quite regulated or taxed just enough. But we've been seeing that with COVID. We've been seeing that, the pandemic would have never happened, or it would already be over if we had just been taxed this much more or had this many more orders. I think it's disgusting. I've been talking with libertarians on the ground in Kentucky, in Illinois, in Arkansas, who are working to rebuild, and none of them want to hear about policy. And frankly, if someone wants to talk climate change in general, and the very next thing out of their mouth isn't talking about deregulating nuclear so that we can greatly reduce our climate footprint while also increasing the amount of energy and the cost of energy, then they're not really seriously discussing climate change to begin with. They're just pandering for votes, and they're trying to push for more regulations and money.
Spike, you just got a standing ovation from the studio. I should tell you, they were standing before, but I feel like the fellas in here.
They started clapping while they were standing.
Well, they weren't clapping so much as just standing there, but I feel like it was an ovation, because what you're saying is absolutely right. We need to deregulate and implement nuclear throughout this great land and really make it the best place on earth. BPOE. All right, panelists.